In the 1970s, American luxury wasn't measured in lap times, fuel economy, or clever packaging. It was measured in inches. The longer the hood, the heavier the doors, the wider the bench seats, and the softer the ride, the more prestigious the car felt. This was the peak of the land yacht era, a time when automakers turned sheer body length into a statement of status. Buick, Oldsmobile, Lincoln, Cadillac, Chrysler, and Mercury all competed to build cars so massive that many modern SUVs would look compact parked beside them. So, in this countdown, we're looking at 10 of the longest American cars of the 1970s, the giants that defined the final golden age of full-size American excess before emissions rules, safety regulations, and downsizing changed everything. Mercury Marquis. The second-generation Mercury Marquis, built from 1969 to 1978, served as Mercury's flagship full-size car and the more upscale counterpart to the Ford LTD. Unlike the earlier Marquis, which was basically a single hardtop coupe, this generation expanded into a full family of body styles, including sedans, coupes, convertibles, and wagons. In the early 1970s, the biggest sedan and coupe versions stretched to roughly 229 inches long, with some versions riding on a longer wheelbase than the Colony Park wagon. Power came from Ford V8s, ranging from the 351 all the way up to the 460, paired with a 3-speed automatic and rear-wheel drive. It was classic big Ford luxury, smooth, roomy, and unapologetically oversized. Dodge Monaco wagon. If you wanted a family wagon that felt more like a rolling cruise ship, the Dodge Monaco wagon delivered exactly that. The 1974-1977 Monaco became Dodge's top full-size model after the Polara disappeared, and the wagon was the real giant of the range. By 1976, it stretched to about 229.5 inches, making it one of the longest wagons of the decade. Under the hood, buyers could choose a 400 cubic inch V8 or the mighty 440, both paired with Chrysler's tough torque flight automatic. Trim levels ranged from standard Monaco to the plush Brougham, with optional faux wood side paneling, giving it that unmistakable luxury wagon look. With production under 6,000 units in some years, it's also one of the rarer giants on this list. Lincoln Continental Mark V. The Lincoln Continental Mark V-E, built from 1977 to 1979, was one of the last great personal luxury coupes. Before downsizing swept the industry, it replaced the softer curves of earlier Marks with a more formal, squared-off shape, and Lincoln packed it with special editions like the Bill Blass, Cartier, Pucci, and Givenchy Designer Series models. At roughly 230.3 inches long, the Mark V was absurdly large for a two-door coupe, longer than many modern full-size SUVs. And that was exactly the point. For Lincoln buyers, size itself was part of the appeal. This wasn't about sports car agility. It was about cruising in silence, surrounded by plush seats, opera windows, thick carpeting, and one of the most theatrical luxury experiences Detroit ever produced. Buick Estate Wagon EC 1975-1976 Buick Estate Wagon took Buick's luxury car formula and stretched it into family hauler form, riding on a platform closely related to the Electra 225. It reached about 231.5 inches in length, making it even longer than many contemporary Pontiac and Oldsmobile wagons. Under the hood was Buick's 455 V8, and in earlier years, you could even get the Stage 1 package, which added more serious towing and performance credentials to an already enormous wagon. One of the coolest features was GM's glide-away tailgate, where the lower tailgate slid under the cargo floor and the rear glass disappeared into the roof. It was an engineering trick straight out of the land yacht playbook, part practical family feature, part showpiece. Oldsmobile 98 by the mid-1970s, the Oldsmobile 98 had grown into the longest car the brand had ever built. The 1974-1975 models stretched to around 232 inches, and the biggest versions were the elegant four-door hardtops and Regency trims. Like its GM stablemates, it was partly enlarged by the new 5 MFH impact bumpers, mandated by safety rules. But Oldsmobile turned that extra bulk into part of the car's stately presence. Power came from the 455 Rocket V8, and the cabin was loaded with the luxury features buyers expected: power seats, power windows, premium trim, thick carpeting, and all the little touches that made the 98 feel like a quieter, slightly more restrained alternative to Cadillac. Chrysler New Yorker, the 1974-1978 Chrysler New Yorker, arrived at exactly the wrong moment in history. Just as the oil crisis was making giant luxury cars look increasingly out of touch. But Chrysler went ahead anyway, launching one of the company's last truly massive, traditional full-size cars. At around 232 inches long, the New Yorker was one of the largest Chryslers ever built, and in brougham trim, it delivered all the visual drama buyers expected from a 1970s luxury flagship. It even retained a chrome-plated metal grille at a time when some rivals had begun switching to plastic. Underneath, though, the New Yorker also showed the downside of late 70s Chrysler engineering, including the troublesome lean burn ignition system that hurt reliability and became a sore point for owners. Lincoln Continental, if the Mark V was Lincoln's personal luxury coupe statement, the 1977-1979 Lincoln Continental sedan was its full-size luxury flagship, built on a traditional body-on-frame platform shared with the Mercury Marquis and Ford LTD. It stretched to around 233 inches and focused entirely on comfort. Coil springs at both ends, soft tuning, thick insulation, and heavy construction gave it the kind of ride that felt less like driving and more like gliding. Inside, the Continental delivered exactly what buyers wanted from a Lincoln in the late 1970s. Formal styling, deep cushioned seating, hushed road manners, and the sense that this wasn't just transportation, it was a statement of success. Buick Electra 225. The 1975 Buick Electra 225 was Buick's flagship sedan at the absolute peak of the brand's full-size era. It rode on GM's massive C-body platform, shared much of its architecture with the Oldsmobile 98, and stretched to roughly 234.4 inches, making it longer than its Oldsmobile cousin. Power came from Buick's 455 V8, backed by a turbo-hydromatic automatic, and the whole experience was tuned for quiet highway comfort rather than performance. Owners often praised the Electra's silence and smoothness, which is exactly what Buick intended, but the era was already ending. By 1977, the Electra was downsized by more than 10 inches, closing the book on Buick's biggest highway cruisers. Cadillac Fleetwood 60. Special, when people think of old-school Cadillac luxury, the Fleetwood 60 Special is exactly the kind of car they imagine. In 1975, it stood near the top of Cadillac's sedan lineup and represented one of the brand's most traditional expressions of prestige. Depending on how you measure it, the 60 Special stretched from roughly 233.3 to 235.6 inches long, making it one of the biggest Cadillacs of the decade. It was available as a massive sedan or in limousine-like configurations, and the plush talisman package took luxury even further with more elaborate seating and trim. Like several other giants of the era, part of its length came from safety-related bumper and fender extensions, but that only added to its imposing presence. This was Cadillac at its most unapologetically full size. 1973, Chrysler Imperial, the crown for the longest American car of the 1970s, goes to the 1973 Chrysler Imperial. As Chrysler's top luxury brand, the Imperial was already a massive car, but the addition of new, federally required bumpers for 1973 pushed it even further. Final length reached a staggering 235.68 inches, enough to edge out Cadillac and claim the top spot on this list. Under the hood was Chrysler's 440 V8, and while 0-60 times in the 11-second range weren't exactly sports car territory, speed was never the point. The Imperial was designed to move like a private lounge on wheels, smooth, quiet, and utterly imposing. Its fuselage styling, with a broad beltline and tapering lower body, made it look even larger than the measurements suggest. In many ways, it was the ultimate expression of pre-downsizing American luxury excess. And that's what makes these cars so fascinating. They weren't just large. They were built during a brief moment when Detroit still believed that luxury meant more metal, more chrome, more wheelbase, more softness, and more road presence. But the forces working against them were already gathering. The oil crisis, tightening emissions standards, and federal safety regulations that made these giants heavier, thirstier, and harder to justify. By the end of the decade, downsizing was unavoidable, and the age of the truly gigantic American car was coming to an end. Still, these machines remain unforgettable because they represent a kind of luxury philosophy that has almost disappeared. Today, prestige often comes from technology, performance, or efficiency. In the 1970s, prestige came from opening a door the size of a dining table, sinking into a pillow-soft seat, and watching the horizon through a hood that seemed to stretch halfway to the next county. So now the question is this: which of these 1970s land yachts best captures the spirit of old-school American luxury for you? Cadillac, Lincoln, Buick, Oldsmobile, Chrysler, or Mercury?